All right, we are live. Thanks for tuning into the Sheet Metal Shaping podcast, where we discuss the pursuit of sheet metal shaping education through traditional coach building techniques. My guest today on the show, all the way from Australia, Mr. Peter Tommasini. How are you?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Thank you.
The living legend. My goodness, you've been doing this a while.
We have 54 years.
Oh my God, Peter, I haven't even been alive for 54 years.
About time I give up, I think.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Really excited for today's episode. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple things. One is some history on the craft. Two are some how-tos. And number three is some patterning and templates. So before we do that, tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's a long story, but I tried to keep it short. I'm Italian born, of course. Was born near Venice. And when I was going to school, I didn't like school very much, and when I was about 14 and a half, I think I decided that I wanted some pocket money. So I worked in a carrozzeria or panel shop on a Saturday just to make some pocket money. And I loved it so much that I gave school away and went to school at night time, believe it or not. And that back in those days, of course, to me, it was just scenes and asking questions. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it did. But I tell you what, later in the years, it all clicked in, if you know what I mean. So it serves me very well. I worked with Italian craftsmen. I'll be picking up the tools, clean the lunchroom. Nothing special, but enough for me to see, what was going on. And of course, that went for probably 12 to 13 months. And then, that went for about a month and a half. And then I decided, as I said before, to go there full time and go to school at night time.
Nice.
And then unfortunately, in 1970, my family emigrated to Australia, so I had to leave everything. So when I came to Australia, of course, I said to my uncle, mind you, not a word of English, not one word of English. But my uncle said, I said to my uncle, I want to fix cars, fix cars. And he put me on a smash repair, which I tell you what, it serves me very well. I did a 5-year, back in those days, it was a 5 years apprenticeship. And those days you had smash repairs and coach building, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Today, it doesn't exist. Okay. Today, you did either one or the other. But them days, you had both. And I was more inclined to do, the coach building side of it, but I had to do the smash repair as well. So I went to this smash repair, did my apprenticeship. And by that time, by the 5 years gone past, I then knew a bit of English and I started sorting out these coach building shops. And I started from there.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm sure doing smash repair, you get to learn how metal moves. Like when somebody hits somebody else, you learn a ton.
But not only that, as I said, I'm glad that I did the smash repair because let's face it, you can make a panel for a motor car, but if the motor car's beneath up the back or the front and the chassis down or up or the window is at a square, if you don't know how to fix that, your quarter panel or mudguard never fit, even if it's perfect. So it's nice to have both, the smash repair side of it and the panel beating and the metal shaping side of it. For
sure. You had mentioned something interesting there about smash repair and coach building being two separate streams. What is the difference?
Yes. Well, the thing is, this is a close cousin, as you know. You're working with a hammer and dolly and a flipper, but I know for a fact that some good smash repairers that are very good in smash cannot do what the metal shaper does. You know what I mean? He might have an idea to make a little patch and weld it in and fill it, but not to the extent that a coach builder does, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Do you think it's a detail? It's like it's a part of the brain that's more detailed or just a different skill set altogether?
Yeah, but it's a different skill set, I say. Different skill set completely,
What has more value in today's market?
Well, that's hard to say. Smash repair today, they're not smash repairers. They're just assemblers, if you know what I mean. I don't know about Canada, but they just get a panel and, if it's too, and it's the cost of labor too. I'll give you an example. If you can buy a mudguard here for an Holden Commodore for about $180. Okay. Now, why would you want to repair it?
Right.
At $150, $60 an hour, when you can buy one for 180. So you just buy a new one. And matter of fact, what I do, I go around panel shops, pick up the guards that they chuck out, take them home, and teach the kids how to repair them.
Ah, nice. That's the circle of life.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
I guess you do really have to hone in on, okay, if you're going to spend the time on this panel, whatever the panel is, it has to be worth something when you're done. It can't be worth less than what you could just buy a new one for, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. And I guess that's where coach building comes in. You need to do cars of high value. Would that be fair?
That's correct. Because what happened is, you don't want to be making, let's presume a Toyota. Let's get a Toyota that is smashed and you want to make the mudguard. Well, you can probably buy a Toyota mudguard for, I don't know, $200, $300, $500 maybe. Well, to make a mudguard, you're looking at $5,000 or $6,000. So it's got to be a Ferrari, Aston Martin, Rolls Royce, a very expensive car.
Mm-hmm.
Like I worked on a GTO replica. Even though it was a replica, it was worth something like $250,000, $280,000.
Yep.
So it's worth to spend $100,000 on the body, if you know what I mean. Back those days. Today you need more money, but I'm talking about 25 years ago. Yeah.
Sure. What has changed in the industry? Let's say if we go back 100 years, what has changed in the industry from 100 years ago in panel beating and coach building to today?
Well, 100 years ago, you had the time, labor was cheap, very cheap, and material was expensive. Today, it's the other way around.
Oh.
Labor is very expensive and the material is cheap. So that's the problem. So unless you've got a customer that is willing to have the right job done and pay the right price, you just don't want to do the job. I mean, why work in 1,000 hours and get paid for 300? You know what I mean? There was time, believe me, there was time when I was learning that I would have done any Ferrari or any Aston Martin for nothing, just for the sake of doing it.
Sure.
But nowadays you can't do that.
That ship has sailed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you think material and labor has changed like that over time?
Well, labor is to do with cost of living, of course. I don't know about in Canada, but here the cost of living is astronomical. The electricity, the phone, the insurance, the petrol. It's just, unless you get a certain amount of money per hour, you'll be better off not doing it because you won't survive. You literally won't survive. Now, on an average, unless a coach builder charges 120 to 150 an hour, he won't survive. No way. Now, as I said, I don't know about Canada or America, but here, you won't survive.
I would imagine you're about the same in Canada. I mean, the U.S., because the U.S. dollar is a little bit stronger, the rate is lower compared to Canada. But the Aussie dollar and the Canadian dollar are very comparable in terms of, like, one Aussie dollar is worth the same as a Canadian dollar, give or take a few cents.
Oh, yeah, but what's the cost of living in Canada? The same as Australia?
I don't know the answer to that, but it's definitely creeping up. I mean, all the things that have happened with interest rates and cost of living and the price of everything, all the things that are happening around the world with modern times. Like, that's such as life right now, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, here, for instance, my wife goes shopping for the two of us.
Yeah.
And you're probably looking roughly about $350 to $400 a week.
Whoa.
Just for the two of us.
Holy, yeah, we're like a couple $100, 200, 250 a week.
Yeah,
in Canada. So you guys are up there for sure.
And electricity as well. Electricity, anything. It's just gone mental.
Yeah. Something off topic of coach building, but just in terms of the Australian economy, when you guys get tools or material or machinery into Australia versus America, for example, what does that look like for you guys? Do you have less access to this kind of a thing that you would typically see in the North American economy, or like how does that work?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because many years ago we did everything. We had the aluminium smelter here. We did everything. We did have everything. Now it's all gone.
Yeah.
So if we want something, we'd have to wait for it. If it's not available, we'll have to wait. The steel went up tremendously. I'll give you an example. When I was making the top wheel for my wheelie machine, I could probably get the steel and machine it and get it polished and hardened for about, just to give you an example, about $550. You get the the wheel, yeah?
Mhm.
Now
Yep.
it's over 800.
Yeah.
Over $800 for a top wheel. So
Yeah.
same with the lower anvils, same with the material. You know, it's just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. We're feeling the same effects too. I mean, by the time you mix labor in there, plus the material, wherever that comes from, whether it's offshore or locally, it's
Yeah.
definitely making a big difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Let's jump into how-tos. Let's talk about some how-tos. Let's build some stuff. So let's just say you want to build a roof skin for a station wagon, for example, fair size roof skin, 6 feet long, something like this. When you have a vehicle that comes into the shop that either needs a repair or you're coach building from scratch, where do you start planning for a roof skin?
Okay. You first of all make sure that both windows, squares, window opening and squares, make sure that hasn't been damaged or any rust on the cantrails or any rust inside the panel. If that's the case, you then build the two cantrails, which is the size of the roof, if you know what I mean, and you build the front and the back. We call it cantrails here. I don't know what they call it, but you know what I mean? The two sides and the two fronts, right? Yep. And the back. And then you wheel up the top skin. If you're on your own, you'll have to do the top in two pieces. If you've got someone helping you, you can probably wheel her up in one piece. So then you'll have the two cantrails attached to the body, the front and back attached to the body, and you then literally wheel up a panel to suit the shape. And you weld it. If you're familiar with any motor car, you've got your inner cantrail, yeah? So you got to make sure that you weld that in front of that so you can actually panel beat it.
So you can get in there.
Because if you're coming in too far in, then you can weld it, but you can't panel beat it.
And if you were going to make this roof skin, if you're on the wheel, would this be a two-person job or could you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've seen the Monaro quarter that I've made. That was an 8x4 sheet.
Oh, wow.
8x4 sheet when I made that. A bit of wheeling there.
Yeah, no doubt. What is the limit, in your opinion, for how big of a piece you can wheel by yourself?
If you can open your arms enough and sustain the weight, even though might be able to touch the wheel with your face, you could probably do 800 to a meter, but that's struggling. Yeah. Any more than that, you need to have someone on the other side.
For sure. And for the folks who don't know, why do you need somebody on the other side? What is the importance of that?
Well, what happens is, you see, if you're trying to do it on your own, and as the panel comes through the wheel, the weight on the other side will put weight on the other side and put a knuckle on your side, if you know what I mean, because the panel's doing that, each time. So it'll put a knuckle on it. And then you turn it around, you put a knuckle on the other side. And chances are that when it comes back, if you can just imagine, you've done wheeling before, haven't you? Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, just imagine what happens, and I'll explain it with my hand. You're going in, the panel go down, you're coming out, and the panel's doing that. So you're putting the shape in, and you're putting the shape out. Putting the shape in and putting the shape out. If it's held by two people, then you can rely on the lower anvil and work accordingly.
Are there any other creative systems that you've used in the past? If you had to work alone, but you had to do this big piece, like if you use like a table or a big fan or something to blow it up, is there any other options?
Yeah, you got an option of having a table with wheels and a sandbag on the table so you can drag it across, but it's never going to be the same, especially if you want to pull down. Let's presume that side or your side needs to be pulled down a little bit, yeah? You can get it, but it's hard. It's hard. Yeah, because it always do a little bit of that. I mean, let's face it, to wheel up a panel, you need to be steady. You need to support the panel. It's the machine. The machine is only a machine. It's how you hold the panel that makes the shape.
True.
If you want to pull down, pull up, pull across, you know what I mean? The wheeling machine doesn't do it for you. The wheeling machine is only a stretching tool. You have to manipulate the panel in such a way that you achieve the shape you want. You might want to pull some shape out, so you pull up. You want to pull some shape at the front, so you pull down or whatever. Yep.
Now, when you're doing that, when you're pulling up or down, are you changing the material thickness at that point, or are you just kind of moving it to a different area?
You just move it. You're just moving metal. I mean,
can you describe that for folks?
Well, okay. So let's presume that I wheeled up a panel and I've got too much shape in the middle. Well, all I do is release the edge on the other side, take the pressure off the wheel, and very lightly, not all at once, you pull up you pull up and get it 3/4 of the way. Then you do it again. You pull up, and get it out of the edges, and you get rid of it that way.
Interesting. But you have to release the edges first. Is that what you're saying?
Of course, yeah. It needs to get out. It needs to get out of the edges. Yeah. In other words, you can actually see it if you loosen the edge a little bit, and it's a little bit wavy. As you do that motion, it'll get tight again.
Ah, interesting. So you're pushing it out like a bed sheet almost.
Correct. You literally think of a bit of plasticine, yeah, and you're doing that with your fingers. That's it.
And it keeps pushing out.
Yeah. You got a ball of plasticine. You put your thumb down and you push it out.
Somebody had said to me the other day that you can shrink on an English wheel. Is this folklore or is this truth?
Well, it's called shrinking, but okay. So what you do is, let's presume you got a loose edge.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can wheel before the edge, and that will tighten it up. You can shrink it. That's how you shrink. You can't literally shrink, but by wheeling before the edge, you will tighten that edge. It's common sense because the edge pulls up. Yeah, as you shape it, it pulls up and it tightens up.
So what is happening within the panel? If you have a loose edge, and assuming you haven't stretched the edge, if you have a loose edge on a panel where you've shaped it and you've done all this work, but your edge is still loose, common sense is to wheel inboard. What is happening with the panel when you wheel inboard?
Well, when you wheel inboard, so you stretching the material in the center or inboard, but the outside edges are non-touch, so they are shorter. So realistically, I know it's not called shrinking, but you think about it. You're increasing the material in the middle, but you're leaving the outside the same. So that stays short. So you got short edges and long center. That's how you get your shapes.
Right. And by stretching inboard.
If it's loose, you just go around the edges and just very lightly tighten it up that way. I mean, if you slip up and you made a mistake, you can just grab it, but you've got to be very careful because if you hit the machine too hard, you're going to put a lump. I mean, if you've seen a stringing machine, you put the string machine, you push down, it puts a lump in front of it. Well, you don't want that. So you just want to touch it, just touch it. And I mean, just touch it, just to tighten it up.
Yeah. A lot of people forget that the English wheel is really a finesse tool.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, I mean, the English wheel is a beautiful tool. It's a wonderful tool if you know how to use it, that is. And it takes a while to get used to it.
Yeah. Let's jump back to that roof skin for a sec. So you'd mentioned placing your welds in advantageous locations. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so I like to oxy weld. I don't use MIG or TIG. A lot of people do. They get away with it. They can do it. I think that the oxy weld is the best, simply because the mere fact that even if you TIG, you've got less distortion, yeah? But the TIG wire, it's got copper in it, and that makes the weld hard. Which in terms, when you panel bit it, that area is harder than the rest of the panel. And that could take time and it could give you a bit of problem. I mean, I'm not saying it can't be done. I've seen it done. People have done it. But if you use wire, the black wire, all the material is the same. It's the same thickness. The heat range is the same and on and on. And even though it buckles too much, if you can control the buckling, you've got no problem. As a matter of fact, I always look at attack it in a certain way. I weld it in a certain way, and my burnt line, let's call it the heat line, is all the same. It doesn't variate. I mean, what that means is I just panel bit the weld and it comes back the way it was.
Right. And when you're doing that, so what you're saying is your heat affected zone is consistent, which means all of the distortion isn't really traveling, it's staying localized.
Correct. And if you can do that, all you need to do then is to panel bit the weld first and then go either side of the weld. You can actually see the color. If you ever done oxy welding, you see the real burnt where the weld is, and then it gets yellower and yellower and then lighter. Well, you can panel bit that very lightly and release it, because let's face it, the panel was perfect before you start. If it's not perfect after you weld, it's because of the heat distortion. So you just release the weld and you're ready to go.
How many different ways could you potentially weld a panel? Like, what are your options? You mentioned MIG, TIG, gas welding.
Well, I gas weld everything, aluminium and steel. The only time that I use a TIG or a MIG is on a frame, obviously.
Ah,
Obviously.
sure.
Yeah.
That's kind of a lost art, eh? Gas welding.
Yeah.
What do you
I
think?
mean, I'm sure that with today technology, you know, people can TIG better than I can, perhaps, and do panel beating better than I can. But I stay with the old-fashioned stuff, what I know.
When you were learning back in the 70s, was gas welding really the only commercially available way?
Gas welder. We did have a TIG in 1972, I think. I'm sorry, a MIG. I think it was probably 1971.
Yeah.
But it was only used for framework or chassis.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was done oxy.
Yeah. And you had mentioned copper in the wire, making the weld hard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. It makes the weld stronger, but also harder. Matter of fact, you want to try yourself, you get a bit of MIG wire, or MIG or TIG wire, take the copper off and weld it both, one with the copper, one with that. You can actually see the difference.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd like to try that. I'd like to compare. Yeah. Wow. Would you recommend trying it for the folks at home? Would you recommend trying that with hammer and dolly or running it through the wheel?
Well, hammer and dolly first to release it. One blow after another, and then put it through the wheel. Interesting.
Good. So if you're saying that a gas weld is softer and more pliable, could you run a gas weld through the wheel without marking your wheels?
Oh, yeah. No problems. Yeah, you got to have the wheels at least 56, 52, 56 Rockwell.
Yeah.
But you won't mark the wheel.
Yeah. And when you're planning your welds, let's talk about where you're positioning them. So we talked about the roof skin. So let's just keep going with the roof skin.
Yeah.
Where would you position your weld to either limit distortion or improve your access?
Well, the weld's there's only one or two places you can put the weld. You can't put it too far in towards the center, because then you'll have a problem with the cant rails. You'd have to literally put your dolly, get underneath the car, put your dolly in position under the inner cant rail, and see how much you can move your dolly left to right. Yeah. And because you don't want to be caught that the shape of the dolly can't go any further because it is the cant rail. So you've got to work all that out. You work where you can, manipulate the dolly, you mark it, and that's where you put your weld.
And what about distortion? If you put distortion closer to like a body line or something like that, do you run the risk of pulling that body line around?
Yes, you do. But again, if the body line was without stress and was right to start off with, just release the weld, it'll come back.
Nice. Do you ever have to plan? Like, can you ever plan in advance by saying, you know what, this shrink will actually help me?
Oh yeah. You got to plan everything in advance. You got to think ahead, 2 weeks ahead, actually. Yeah. Now you always got to think ahead. But sometimes, no matter how much you think, it's something goes wrong. But then you'll have to be able to know how to fix it. That's the good part about it. How do I fix this?
That's where you come in, Professor Tommasini.
Well, I wouldn't call myself a professor, but I've done it before a few times. So, look, it's as I said, every day is a school day. I could easily make a mistake like anybody else.
Yeah.
But the good part about it is that with the experience, you might say, well, look, okay, what have I done here? What this happened? You go back and fix it.
Yeah. You run classes, right? So when you have students come through and, ask you, how do I build this panel or how do I fix this problem? What are the biggest issues that your beginner students face?
I believe the reading of the panel. Even though I give them a blocking hammer and I give them a sandbag and a stump and the pattern and the profiles, they can't read the panel. In other words, they blocking it, even though they block into what I tell them to block it, but when they are at a certain stage, they go, oh, now what? So it's very important to be able to say, okay, that's got shape there, that hasn't got the shape there. You know what I mean? To be able to read the panel. And then, of course, to a point, you put the profiles in. Sure.
And profiles, how so?
Yeah. Their reading of the panel is the main problem. The main problem.
Interesting. Shape and form. Do your students have an issue with shape and form, understanding what the difference is?
Shape and form, what do you mean?
Like how much to stretch a panel or shrink a panel?
Yeah. Well, you go easy. You block it. You don't go mental. You block it. You look at it. You check it. You make sure that there's no twist in it or stress. You take the stress out. You then block it some more, and on and on and on until you get it to a position where you can look at it.
Yeah. Stress is an interesting topic. When you're shaping panels or when you're explaining to a student how to shape a panel, how do you keep the stress out of a panel, or how do you recognize that it's in there to begin with?
Okay. So let's presume you're making an outside of a 1930 mudguard, or, the outside or the inside. So you make your pattern, you make your profiles, you mark everything where there's got to be blocked, you do your blocking, your shrinking. I mean, if the panels start to look like that and it's not meant to be, you need to bring it back by twisting or by all sorts of things. And you need to release all the block marks on the wooden stump and make them smaller. In other words, you got big walnuts, yeah?
Yeah.
So once you got the walnuts and you're nearly there with the shape, just go back on the block and just clean all those walnuts as much as possible, as smooth as you can with the blocking hammer, and then twist it back. Always have the panel looking something like it's supposed to, rather than, you know what I mean? Because you can't read it then. Think about it. You're blocking a panel, and I'm sure you've done some of it, and then you said, oh, what the hell's happened to this? But if you start to bring it back by twisting it or pushing it with your stomach or open it up or close it, oh, yeah, that's something like it. Then you can read it. Then you can apply more blocking or more smoothing, if you know what I mean.
For sure. Is there anything different with the way that people are shaping in Australia versus the way that maybe, for your heritage, for Italy, the way that people are shaping in Italy?
Oh, good question. Well, okay. So in Italy, what I saw, I never used it. Obviously, I was 14 and a half years old, for God's sake. In Italy, they used to use the maglio, which is
it's like a sledgehammer.
It's
right?
correct. It's a bang bang. So what they used to do is block it with that. If they were making a doorskin, it wasn't blocked like that. It was blocked on a steel bench or a cast iron bench with a hammer, special hammer, and you just backwards tap 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 until they shape it. Okay. If it was more shape, well, they put it on the maglio,
right,
and then they weld it together. You know what I mean? But here in Australia, of course, well, another thing is that in Italy, back in those days, I never saw an Englishwheel. I had no idea. Nah, they didn't use the Englishwheel back then.
Yeah.
The first Englishwheel I've ever saw was at the school. When I went to school here in Australia, I said, what the hell is that? and that was the first time I seen it. And the first time I tried it. And to tell you the truth, the first time I tried, I said, what's so good about this machine? Because, I went in there and squeezed, yeah? And the minute you squeeze the panel, go, and you got to get in a little bit at a time. That's
funny. How did you have to change your perspectives then? You going from like Italian culture over to Australia, and you're like, hang on a second here.
I just mixed them. Mixed them. They put the two together. I was very lucky too, by the way. What I forgot to mention is that when I actually learned their language and start to look for a panel shop, well, you call it body shop over there, we call it panel shop here. I was extremely, extremely lucky. I mean, I could have landed anywhere, but I've landed where there was English people. There was 3 of them. One worked at Aston Martin, one worked at Windovers, and one worked at Rolls-Royce.
Wow.
They were all over 50, and they were here in Australia because the climate was a lot warmer than England. And boy, did I suck some stuff out of their brains, I can tell you.
Yeah, you just turn into a sponge and just give me it all.
Sponge, you got no idea. Mattress. And I got, as I said, very lucky. I mean, one of them was incredibly talented. My God, he was the best I've ever seen.
Sure.
And I've learned a lot from him. And of course, ask question. But another thing that I did that I don't think kids will do today, I will ask the question, watching what he does, go home, buy some steel, and practice.
Yeah.
Now, even though I didn't know, what is he doing, or maybe a little bit, I try. And then what I'll do is I'll take the panel back to work and I'll say things like, look, I saw you doing that panel yesterday. I went home and practiced, but I'm not getting anywhere in a
Doesn't
hurry.
look the same. Yeah.
So he'll help me out. You know what I mean? A bit of that, little bit of
Yeah.
that. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's how I did it.
As a teacher, I'm sure you probably appreciate, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but I'm sure you probably appreciate when you see people taking your teachings and your education and actually applying that.
Oh yeah,
Right?
very much. It's very much. As a matter of fact, I mean, I teach quite a few people, and
Yeah.
there's probably 2 or 3 in Australia that end up having their own panel shop.
Cool.
You know, and because it's very hard to learn and keep learning. You know what I mean? And have the passion to do things too. You know, people sometimes do it because I'll give it a go, see what happens, but that's not good enough. You know,
Right.
you got to be serious about it. You know.
Mm-hmm. Let's change gears here and talk about patterning. And how do we read a panel? How do we make a pattern? So when you're starting a project, what are the options for patterning an existing piece to then reproduce it?
Okay, so first of all, you look at it with a light. You look where the crown is. You look where you might be able to weld it. You look at if you can make it in 2 pieces, 1 piece, 3 pieces. So you dissect it that way. Depends on how much you want to work with, you know.
Mhm.
I rather do it in less pieces as possible, even though, you know, sometimes it's a little bit hard on the wheel. But, I mean, if it's impossible, it's impossible, yeah? But if you can do it, you do it. So you look at the limelight, you mark it with a tester, or you guy call it something else, I think, the black thing there. Then that's it. That's the one. And then you put your paper over the top. You lay the paper on the flattest part as possible. You put a bit of tape or a magnet, and you have a look what the paper wants you to do. Does it want it to be gathered? Does it want it to be cut and stretched? Does it want to do this? And you put all your lines in there. You put your crown, you put where your profile is going to be, you put where your weld's going to be, and that's your mat.
Right.
And then, of course, you look at it again, you check it, make sure you're not putting the strings from the wrong spot or whatever. Then you lay it on a blank, and you do exactly the same thing. You mark it all out, and you got your marking there.
Mm-hmm.
And you do your shrinking when the paper tells you to shrink. You do your stretching when the paper tells you to shrink, stretch, and so on and so on.
Yeah. Are you more apt to shrink or to stretch or a mix of both?
Well, I stretch a lot. I stretch a lot and shrink on the stump with the blocking hammer primarily. Keep doing it that way until maybe the panel is, steady enough and good enough to perhaps touch it on the shrinker if I have to. Just touch it up a little bit. I'll give you an example. I've seen, not that it's wrong, don't get me wrong, none of it's wrong, but I've seen people grabbing a bit of metal, shrink the edges first, and then go and block it or stretch it. Well, I don't do it that way. I stretch it first, reduce the edges that way because they stay the same. I mean, if you can go from 1 to 10, your center is 10, but the outside's still 1. Yeah. So that's short. And then I go ahead and shrink it accordingly. But I use the shrinker very little.
Interesting. I've seen some of your videos. I think you have an equal machine or something similar.
I made it. Yeah, I designed myself. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. What are your thoughts on that machine, and how do you best utilize it?
Okay, so that machine was mainly made because back when I designed it, it took too long to tuck shrink, you know, with all the puck shrink. It just takes too long.
Yeah.
So I designed that machine to be able to puck hard and quick.
Yep.
And that's the only purpose of it because, you know, to the tucking on and it just takes too long. I mean, it's good to know to do it, but it takes too long to do it. You know what I mean?
I actually saw in one of your videos, you were shrinking. This is really interesting. You had like a bunch of students in the class, and one of the students said like, oh, you know, I got to shrink this thing. And you walked over there with a hammer and you're like, we're going to shrink, and then we're going to crush the tuck, and we're going to do it all in one go. And I was looking at, I'm like, how's he going to shrink with this hammer? And you got the dolly and you hit beside the dolly and you created a ruffle. And then you hit on the other side of the dolly, created a ruffle, whacked it down, planched it out, and said, there you go. And you walked away. And I thought, oh my God, how the hell did this guy do this in like 3 seconds?
You can do that. You can do that. Yeah.
So for like, I just explained it roughly. Explain how you actually do that. Like, what is the technique here?
Okay. So let's presume you've got a panel that has got a high spot in the middle and it's too high to either let out or, you know, it's just there. Well, you can shrink with the oxy. The problem with that is that you can put so many strings that you actually lose which string does what. So in other words, let's say you put 5 strings and they start to pull in. It's down, but it starts pulling. Now, which is the string that affected that? You don't know. But if you put your dolly underneath there and keep it firm and go around it and make up a little dimple, then string that. Now, keep in mind that it doesn't have to be red hot. It could be hot. You take it down and then you have a look at it from there. So what you've done, you pull all the, okay, if you got a pimple, the high spot is not only on that pimple, it's on the other side as well, yeah? So if you can put all that into that pimple and make the surface around it perfect, then you only string that spot.
Yeah.
And then if it pulls in too far, just release that spot, nothing else. And you get it that way.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And what about on an edge? Can you do the same thing on an edge, create a tuck? Or
no. Well, you can, but you'll be better off then go back on the shrinking machine and just touch it with the shrinking machine.
Gotcha.
You know, realistically, you don't want to do too much damage on the edge because if you miss, you'll stretch it again. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Back to patterning. So you had mentioned paper patterns, paper templates. That's your preferred method.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Is that right? Do you cut the paper or do you fold it? What do you do?
I fold it. And then what happens is I fold it. Because if you cut it, then a lot of work to bring it back and maybe tape it up because you can open it too far.
Yeah.
Then you got the wrong thing. So I fold it and then I tap it down. And then when it's off the pattern, I'll take the tape off and open it back up and make sure that I get the right amount of material.
Gotcha. And that's what you trace.
That's correct. And that's what and that's exactly where I put the strings, where the paper tells me to.
And then how do you know if you're getting close to the final shape? Do you make cardboard gauges or something, or how does that work?
I use MDF.
Yep.
I use MDF and I make patterns every 120, 130 mil, depending on the job. I make profile that way, horizontal and vertical. And I use the gauges. Actually, I got the profile gauges for the vertical side. There's 100 of them. So I can use that way. But I make horizontal at an MDF.
MDF, how thick?
3 mil.
3 mil. So that would be, what is that in inches? Like 1/8 of an inch?
No idea.
I don't know. Okay. So being Canadian, we're supposed to work in the metric system, right? But for the love of God, I've never seen a metric tape measure in my life. Like if somebody says, cut me lumber 1.5 meters long, I'd be like, what the heck? What is 1.5 meters? It's like 6 feet. But I just never work in metric, right? I don't know. Skilled trades over here in Canada always seem to work in the imperial system,
is that
like
right?
the Americans, but everywhere else,
it's a lot easier in metric. A lot easier, to me anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what the hell were we talking about? MDF. You use MDF.
Yeah.
So you cut the gauge out of MDF. Why MDF instead of cardboard?
Well, they last longer. They don't get damaged. If it's cardboard that they drop on the floor, they can get damaged and bent. MDF doesn't. If you do a lot of it, if you're doing a repetition of the particular panel, I make them out of aluminium.
Right.
Literally cut the aluminium out, and let's presume that you cut too much out. I'm talking mil or two. You just belt the aluminium on the ground or on the bench and refile it.
Yeah, that's right.
And you gain that mil and a half.
How many other ways are there for somebody to do a pattern?
Well, I believe there's a flexible shape pattern that is very used a lot in America.
Yeah, racially.
I don't use that. I don't use that method at all. The reason why I don't use it is because it's for me. That's for me. The way I see it is, it's useful. It's a good idea. Don't get me wrong. But think of this: if I've got a panel in front of me that I'm making a flexible shape pattern, why would I want to make a flexible shape pattern when I've got the panel in front of me that I can take a profile? Well, you got your panel, take a profile of it, mark it where it goes, and there you go.
Done.
It's done. As I said, I'm not criticizing the flexible shape by all means, but to me, it's a lot better to put the paper pattern there, mark up what I want to mark up, put the profiles, and away I go.
And then how do you ensure symmetry with a paper pattern? How do you make the other side?
As I make it, once I've got one, I'll make the other.
Just do it again.
Yeah, do it again.
Yeah, same profile, same everything, same paper.
Well, depends on what car you're using, you're working on, because let me tell you, I made a mistake once on a Ferrari. I made a door skin, use the same pattern to make the other side, and it was about
Not the same. Yeah.
No, it was longer. So in that particular case, you make two patterns, but you use the same profiles. Yeah.
I had a conversation with somebody today about this very same issue, and they said, "Oh yeah, these Ferraris. Everybody reveres the Ferraris from days gone by, and they're gorgeous and they're amazing and all this stuff. They're not square."
If you ever take the door trim off a Ferrari, you'll be horrified. They're very rough, very rough.
Horrified. Oh my God.
They're very rough, very rough. But when they all put together and painted, they look all right. But they are out, and so is Aston Martin. I mean, in the next time that you ever see an Aston Martin that hasn't been touched, you ever look the left-hand wheel arch, the right-hand wheel arch. Yeah. There could be between the bar and the wheel, there could be 10, 15 mil difference. But if you don't see it, you don't see it. But that's how they were. The handmade cars. That's how they are.
Absolutely. Well, as we wind the episode down here, what do you think, in your opinion, just like, because you've been doing this for so long, what do you think is missing in the industry today versus what maybe was had years ago?
Very simple. Government. Very simple. The government it's ruined everything. The schools, in my time, the government will pay the employer to take the kids to school. My school block was a week at a time. A week of school, 3 weeks of work. A week of school, 3 weeks of work. Yeah, and the government will pay for that. That's gone. Right. The government pays very little. If you got an apprentice nowadays, you got to pay his holiday pay, his pay packet. You got to waste time in teaching. You got to have 17.5% loading. You got to have the superannuation. I mean, you can be paying apprentice. Let's presume, just as a sake, you could be paying $12 an hour, but it's actually costing you $32 an hour, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And the idea is this, that also very important, that back in those days, you could have had an apprentice learning from 6, 7 tradesmen. So, you change him over and he learns. Nowadays, if you got a 1 or 2 man operators, you can't afford it. And that's the difference. That's the big difference. It's not taught at school as much. It's all go, put it together and get out of the door. It's all ruin. Right. There's no time to teach people. Even today, I've got people ask me if I want to, take them as an apprenticeship. I said, look, it can't be done. It cannot be done. Yeah. It's not like it used to be.
Sure.
Things have changed since 1968 to 2023. It's changed a hell of a lot. In my industry. I don't know any other, but I would presume if you're a woodworker or machinist, it'll be the same.
Yeah. Do you find the passion of the younger generation is lesser prevalent versus maybe what it once was? Yeah.
Yes. Very much so. Very much so. And I can see that in the students. Sure. Maybe 1 out of 10 will pursue the metal shaping. Most of them, it's either too hard, or I'll give you an example. I got 2 kids, and I would have liked so much to have them to keep going in my shop, but both said, "Dad, you're mad. It's just too hard." He said, "I can make better money working not as hard."
Sure.
And that's the attitude.
Where do you think the biggest opportunity is right now in this craft, in this trade?
Well, you mean how forward it would go? Do you mean that?
Well, I mean, for example, a bricklayer is always going to be needed, but I mean, metal shaping isn't necessarily always needed, but it's a desired industry. It's not a necessity. It's we just want. So where's the opportunity?
Well, okay. So cars will be around for a long time. I mean, they might not be the 1920 cars, but now we got, cars here in Australia that are the 70s and are worth a lot of money. So while there's passion for cars and passion to make them look good and restore them, it'll go a little bit longer. How long? I don't know, but I think we're going for a few years more. Maybe another 10, 15 years, maybe 20. There will be time though when, look, it's all to do with interest. While there's people interested in cars, there will be interest in metal shaping. If for some reason we got no interest in cars, well, that then metal shaping will die. It will go into maybe making ornaments or making gates or, making flowers, you know what I mean? But not in cars. But while the interest is in cars, I think we got a long way to go yet.
Same skill set in something like architecture versus automotive?
Yeah. I mean, you either shrink or stretch metal or both or combine both. I'd say very similar. Yeah. You're working with a lot less metal for it. So you might be working with copper but the principle is the same. If you want to make a leaf, you got to stretch the leaf and, it'd be the same. Just a lot smaller panel, should we say.
Right. Peter, this has been so much fun. I can tell, like, from this side of the microphone, I can tell your genuine passion for the industry. Like it just exudes, it just comes through. Like it excites you. One of the questions on my list today that I didn't even ask you because it was just self-explanatory was, what motivates you to keep going? And like, I can just tell that this is just you. Like this is
I just love the trade. My body's almost completely finished. I mean, there's not one bone in my body or one muscle in my body that is not destroyed by working, but I love the trade. I love the trade. To me, it was only a hobby. It was a passion. It was a job. It was a paying job. You name it. And while my body lets me keep going, I will keep going. Once everything locks up, then I have to stop. But no, that's a passion of mine, not just a job. And I tell you what, and if you got passion, see, a lot of people said, "Oh, I love the job, but I haven't got the passion." Well, that's not true. If you got the passion, the passion will come. If you know what I mean, because you got to keep insisting. That's only a piece of metal. I'm the boss, not the metal. You know what I mean? You got to hit it that way.
Wise words, Mr. Peter Tommasini. Thank you so much for being here. Where can people find out about more about you and your videos?
My website, www.handbuilt.net.au. For the videos, you got under either DVDs or video. I think it's video, and go on Vimeo on demand and just follow the prompts.
Beautiful. And you have a new one coming out as well. Number 11.
Yes, number 11 will be in a week. We were just discussing that this morning with the guy that helps me out with the computer because I'm not much of a computer person. About a week it'll be available on Vimeo. Beautiful. And then of course the hard copy as well.
Thanks for tuning into the Sheet Metal Shaping Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.